Now, before I begin tonight, I would like to inform all of you that I am suffering from an illness most commonly known as the common cold. So, please bear with me tonight so that we can all have an awesome time. So, many of you may have noticed that the theme of tonight's event is known as the spirit of inquiry. Well, what exactly is the spirit of inquiry, and what is its essence? Well, the spirit of inquiry, as defined by the National League for Nursing, is a persistent sense of curiosity that informs both learning and practice. Essentially, the spirit of inquiry is the attitude of coming curious and asking intelligent questions. Now, that being said, it doesn't necessarily take an intelligent individual in order to ask intelligent questions. One simply needs a desire to learn more about what is around them. This attitude or spirit is often exemplified in younger children. You may have heard a young child asking a lot of why questions. Why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why is the earth round? And to you and me, these may seem like very elementary questions. They may seem like questions asked with the intent to simply annoy us. But in all honesty, take a moment to just consider these questions from the perspective of the child asking them. Because these questions may very well be asked with the intent to learn more about their surroundings and their environment. These questions could be level with their current understanding of the universe. So why is it that as children grow up, their sense of curiosity doesn't necessarily seem to grow along with them? When I am about to ask a question in class, I usually always almost ask and then end up reconsidering, telling myself that I can either ask it later or Google it on my own time. Things like, oh, it was a stupid question anyway. The teacher said we're tight on time and I don't want to bother them with additional questions. And if I ask too many questions, I'll either A, look pretty dumb, or B, I'll look like a teacher's pet. The whole mentality of, I don't need to understand this for the test, therefore, I don't need to understand this at all, is pretty common amongst high school students, including me, especially when we're forced to stay up extremely late at night, studying for 3 or 4 tests at a time. And unfortunately, this mentality can prove to be pretty detrimental in the long run. One of the main things I find that really decreases confidence and participation in the classroom is something known as anti-intellectualism, otherwise known as nerds can't be cool. In an opinion piece written by Leonid Friedman that appeared in the New York Times, it claims, do we really expect to stay afloat by largely importing our scientists and intellectuals, as we have done for a major portion of this century, without making an effort to cultivate a pro-intellectual culture at home? Why do we constantly ridicule that one student that asks more questions than the rest? Why do we find one of our peers weird when they seem to take a genuine interest in what they learn on a day-to-day basis in class? Using Friedman's argument that anti-intellectualism is affecting our country detrimentally, we can also take it a step further by saying that anti-intellectualism is affecting our students negatively on an individual basis. In an era of anti-intellectualism, coupled with a high demand for efficiency in the real world, we have stopped seeing it as imperative that we prioritize the learning process over the grading system. American journalist Thomas Friedman claims in his book, The World is Flat, that motivated curiosity is highly crucial to educational achievement. However, it is to be noted that students of the 21st century are under much more pressure to perform than students of previous centuries, especially when it comes to taking on extremely challenging, extremely time-consuming classes all in the name of boosting a college application or resume just to stand out in a field of equally competitive students all vying for the same thing. And unfortunately, due to this pressure, the inspiration to truly learn dissipates over time. Students are now more focused on studying to the test than they are on the actual learning of it all. After all, this approach to studying seems more effective, doesn't it? Not exactly. A study done in 1989 by the St. Mary's Hospital Medical School in London concerning study habits in preclinical students found a decrease in deep and strategic approaches and an increase in surface learning approaches. These surface learning approaches were then found to be correlated with poor end-of-year examination performance. Why is it that we constantly encourage this kind of mentality? And why is it that we have generally tend to ignore this kind of tendency? Now, granted, this study was done in 1989, quite a while ago, but I could argue that this is relevant even today. In a world of accelerated academia, students no longer have the time to invest in learning anything beyond the textbook. It is no wonder we as students are no longer motivated to learn anything beyond what we are required to. It's no wonder we don't ask questions. And these pressures don't apply only to students. In fact, according to an article by the National Education Association, legislation such as No Child Left Behind has arguably raised the stakes for testing, potentially tying student performance to teacher job stability. This, according to psychologist Rodney A. McCloy, is possibly why teachers are more stressed out about what they need to cover in a class. Now, granted, this No Child Left Behind Act is only applicable to certain classrooms in certain grades, but I find that there are similar factors. AP classes are primarily focused on teaching to the advanced placement exam administered at the end of the year. And while there's nothing wrong with this, it does put teachers on a pretty tight schedule in order to cover as much as they can in order to adequately prepare their students for these tests. Standardized tests such as the PSAT, the ACT, and the SAT have often, not always, but often ended up defining the rank of a school. The pressure to maintaining the good standing of a given school often falls on its teachers as they scramble to teach as much as they possibly can in as little amount of time as possible in order to prepare their students for these tests. Putting teachers under this kind of pressure doesn't really allow for much time in class for questions asked out of pure curiosity, not necessarily related to the syllabus, to be asked. And yes, of course, students have the opportunity to ask these kinds of questions outside of class time, but I really feel that it takes away from the holistic learning experience that every student will benefit from if questions asked out of curiosity are answered within class time. So what are the effects of this conundrum that the educational system faces today? Well, in the modern day workplace, the expectation is that you should be able to ask interesting, relevant, and intelligent questions in order to identify a problem and consequently evaluate its solution. STEM fields are constantly on the lookout for people who know how to ask what kinds of questions when in order to further enrich several areas of research. However, it often goes unnoticed that as individuals exit the classroom setting and enter the workplace setting, they aren't necessarily prepared with the tools they need in order to ask these kinds of questions. How are we expected to know how to ask what kinds of questions when we were never really taught how to in school, or rather, never actively encouraged to do so? Here's what I'm proposing. Students, We need to stop focusing so much on the optics of everything and what people might think of us if we ask more than one question per every other month in class. Just think, if we weren't so concerned about what people would think of us, then learning could easily become an engaging experience. School could become something that we could look forward to, a place where we could truly learn, as opposed to a place where you just have to slog through everything. Take time out of your day every day, and yes, I know this is awfully hard, I get it, with our busy schedules and everything, but try to take a little bit of time out of your day to come up with interesting and creative questions based on what you learned in class. This will not only deepen your understanding of the topic at hand, but your teacher may even appreciate you for going the extra step. Now, I would like to say that I feel like a hypocrite when I talk about all of this, because I'm a student that struggles with asking questions in class and struggles with raising my voice in class. I'm also that student that memorizes as much as I can the day before the test, takes the test, and then proceeds to forget everything I just memorized the second after I hand in the test. So, I'm definitely not trying to take a holier-than-thou stance on this issue. But it's an issue I feel should be discussed within our community of students and teachers, because I know that there are students out there who will relate to what I'm talking about. Educators, from the perspective of a student, here are some things I feel we can add to our classroom experience in order to stimulate this idea of curiosity. One thing that you could possibly do is try incorporating more discussion-based activities in the class. And yes, I know, students usually hate being forced to talk to one another, but I truly feel that this will stimulate a flow of ideas and thoughts, and it empowers students to learn from each other as opposed to learning from a textbook. Another thing that could possibly happen is maybe you add a section for extra credit in your grade book based on extraordinary participation. Because one thing I can definitely guarantee you is that most students are crazily incentivized by extra credit. Another thing that I would suggest you do is maybe sending your students home, instead of sending your students home with assignments that we classify as busy work, maybe once in a while try sending your students home with assignments tasking them on creating interesting questions and creative questions based on what they learned in class. I'm not saying that this is an assignment that has to occur on a daily basis, but I do think that this will put more of an emphasis on a creative approach to learning as opposed to a mechanical approach. So, why should students ask questions? Because it helps them prepare. It helps them see multiple dimensions to a given topic, allowing them to understand, truly understand the concept at hand, as opposed to just memorizing it. It allows them to apply what they've learned into real-world situations. It allows them to seek connections and explanations, all skills needed in the workplace. It has already been established that the spirit of inquiry is an absolute must in order to enrich several areas of studies and research. But this spirit has to start somewhere. Why not in our classrooms, where bright minds are readily available? This is what will build bright and successful generations of innovative thinkers to come. This is what our world, our rapidly changing, rapidly growing world needs today, right now. Thank you.